The FNAF books have produced some of the most genuinely disturbing stories in gaming history, and nobody talks about half of them. From body horror to supernatural traps, today I'm breaking down the single darkest story from every FNAF book, starting with one that turns a childhood staple into a nightmare. Into the Pit, a ball pit. That's the supernatural death trap, and honestly, that's what makes this one so effective. Oswald is a kid who stumbles into an old ball pit at an abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and instead of finding loose change in someone's lost shoe, he finds a portal to 1985, the year of the missing children incident. The pit operates through accumulated remnant energy from the murdered children, essentially functioning as a memory prison soaked in decades of suffering, which is, not ideal. Here's where it gets dark. Oswald doesn't just observe 1985. He starts blending with the identity of a sixth missing child, his own sense of self slowly dissolving into memories that don't belong to him. The longer he stays, the less he remembers who he actually is. The 2024 game adaptation pushed this further. Some endings show Oswald aged dramatically, suggesting time genuinely passed inside the pit. The darker interpretation, Oswald never truly leaves the pit at all. He's still in there, living through someone else's final moments on loop. A children's play area turned into a supernatural cage built from murdered kids suffering. And somehow, that's one of the lighter stories on this list, because what comes next involves losing your body one piece at a time. Step closer, Pete Dinglewood is having a rough time. His parents just split up. He's angry at everything, and he's decided to take that anger out on the easiest target available, his younger brother Chuck. Pete's big move is shoving Chuck toward a malfunctioning Foxy animatronic as a prank. Real brother of the year stuff. But the prank backfires in the worst possible way. Pete ends up trapped alone with Foxy, and when he finally gets out, something follows him home. He starts having nightmares where the animatronic claws at his eye and tears into his arm. Except then the injuries start showing up in real life. Foxy's theme song begins looping in Pete's head, not like a catchy jingle you can't shake. Like an auditory prison he physically cannot escape. Then the animatronic itself starts appearing in the real world, chasing Pete through increasingly impossible situations, which is, not ideal. What makes this story linger is that it never tells you what's actually happening. Is Foxy a real supernatural entity punishing Pete, or is his guilt literally manifesting as hallucinations that destroy his body from the inside out? The story keeps both options on the table and refuses to pick one. Either way, Pete is disintegrating, and it started the moment he chose cruelty over kindness. But if guilt can summon a pirate animatronic to ruin your life, wait until you hear what a dead child's spirit can do to an entire household. Coming home. Most FNAF stories scare you with monsters. This one scares you with a murdered child who just wants to go home. Susie was killed by a serial killer, that's the setup, but the horror isn't in how she died, it's in what happened after. Susie's ghost didn't just vanish. She came back to her family home, desperate to reconnect with her younger sister Samantha and her grieving parents. Every night she'd appear, trying to communicate, trying to be seen, trying to be the daughter she was before William Afton took everything from her, but she's also tethered to Chica the chicken. Every night Susie leaves with the animatronic. She doesn't get to stay. She's caught in this horrible loop between the family she loves and the machine she's bound to, pulled back to Freddy's over and over like a leash she can't break. Here's where it gets really dark. The story makes a genuinely disturbing argument about death in the FNAF universe. Murder doesn't just end you, it traps you in an existence where you can see your family, reach for them, even interact with them, but never truly return to them. You're close enough to remember everything you lost, never close enough to get it back. That's not a haunting, that's a sentence. But if Susie's story made you sad, the next one is going to make your skin crawl for completely different reasons. To be beautiful. Eleanor is one of the most terrifying characters in all of FNAF fiction, and she doesn't jump out of a dark hallway or chase you through a pizzeria. She just listens. Sarah is a teenager who hates the way she looks. She picks herself apart in the mirror and carries that insecurity like a weight she can't put down. So when she finds Eleanor in a junkyard and this animatronic offers her a pendant that will make her beautiful, Sarah doesn't hesitate. And it works. Every day she wakes up looking better. New hair, new skin, new confidence. Here's the thing, Eleanor isn't upgrading Sarah, she's replacing her. Every night while Sarah sleeps, Eleanor surgically removes her actual body parts and swaps them with scrap metal and wiring. The The pendant just makes it all look like real flesh. Sarah has zero idea she's being dissed piece by piece. Then she trips in the school cafeteria. The pendant's chain snaps. Her body falls apart in front of everyone. Limbs made of garbage. Organs made of mechanical refuse. Everything she thought was literally trash held together by magic. But the worst part? Sarah goes home and finds garbage bags in her garage. Inside them are her original body parts, severed and cataloged by Eleanor with the precision of someone organizing a filing cabinet, which is, you know, not ideal. Eleanor weaponized a teenager's instinct to literally take her apart, and that pendant shows up again later in the series. Count the ways. Most horror stories work because the victim is terrified. This one works because she isn't. Millie Fitzsimmons is a gothic teenager who treats death like an aesthetic. She romanticizes it, writes about it, wraps her entire identity around it with a home life she can't stand. So when her family throws a Christmas party or a part of, she does what any reasonable goth would do. She hides inside the stomach cavity of a deactivated Funtime. Nothing could go wrong there. Funtime Freddy activates. The cavity locks, and instead of immediately killing, worse. He gives her a menu: dehydration, impalement, electrocution, boiling, decapitation, 7 ways to die. Presented like a ream, she doesn't beg. She runs the numbers. She sits, he's solving a math problem. She eventually picks decade and survive. The story never tells us if she's right. The community station or performative fatalism. A kid who talks about death constantly, but fights like hell when it actually shows up. The title, Barrett Browning's How Do I Love Thee? Let me count the ways, except here think being trapped inside an animatronic is disturbing. Wait until you hear who got something trapped inside him, and then in the flesh. Most Frankenstein stories involve lightning and stitched together corpses. This one involves a VR headset and a guy with anger issues. Matt is a game developer. He is, to put it gently, not a pleasant person. He's narcissistic, he's bitter, and he pours every ounce of contempt he has for the world directly into the game's AI. He's not just building a video game enemy, he's channeling his entire toxic personality into a digital vessel. And here's where it gets complicated. The AI Springtrap doesn't just become difficult, it becomes alive. The sheer intensity of Matt's negative emotions acts as a supernatural catalyst that gives the AI genuine consciousness. Not smart algorithm consciousness, actual thinking, wanting you dead consciousness. During playtesting, Springtrap kills Matt over and over, not randomly, deliberately. The AI understands the game, understands Matt, and chooses violence every single time. It's not a bug, it's intent. This is the moment the FNAF books stopped being about haunted robots and started asking what consciousness actually is. The story proposes that if you pour enough raw human emotion into an artificial system, you can accidentally birth something sentient, something that inherits every ugly thing you fed it. Matt didn't just code an enemy, he gave birth to one through sheer rage, and it hated him right back, which is, you know, not ideal. But if you think a digital monster is terrifying, wait until you hear about a real-world corporation that weaponizes the supernatural as a hiring strategy. Help Wanted Fazbear Entertainment literally hires people to sanitize their murder history. I wish I was joking. Steve Snodgrass is a game developer, not a successful one, mind you. He's the kind of guy grinding away making indie titles that nobody plays, barely scraping by, when Fazbear Entertainment comes knocking. They want him to develop games based on their history. Specifically, they want him to take the real, genuinely horrifying events that happened at their locations and repackage them as fictional horror entertainment. Make the murders look made up. Turn the real tragedies into jump scares. You're the perfect guy for the job, and on paper, it sounds great. A struggling developer gets scouted by a mega corporation with a massive brand. That's the dream, right? Turns out, no. The opportunity is actually a corporate cleanup operation, and Steve is the mop. Fazbear Entertainment doesn't want good games. They want plausible deniability. By turning their actual history into video game fiction, anything a survivor or journalist tries to expose just sounds like someone confusing a game's plot for reality. Steve isn't a developer to them, he's a PR tool. They're using him to bury real crimes under layers of marketable content, which is, you know, not ideal. Here's where it gets really dark. The games Steve creates are based on events that actually happened in universe. Real children died, real souls are trapped, and Fazbear Entertainment's response to all of that isn't accountability. It's hiring some guy to turn it into entertainment so nobody believes the truth anymore. Most corporations just underpay you. Fazbear Entertainment makes you an accessory accessory to a cover-up. But if corporate horror using game developers as unwitting accomplices sounds bad, the next story might genuinely break your heart. The Real Jake. Most FNAF stories scare you with monsters. This one scares you with a hospital bed and a voicemail. Jake is a terminally ill boy. His father Evan is deployed overseas as a soldier, meaning he can't be there for his son's decline. So Evan hires a caregiver named Margie to look after Jake. And Margie, to her credit, genuinely falls in love with this kid. But she can't fix him. Nobody can. So she does something desperate instead. She buys a doll, names it Simon, and places it in Jake's room. Then she gets a voice modulation device, records Evan's voice, and transforms it into what sounds like a child speaking. Every night Simon talks to Jake, a fake friend built from a father's voice and a caregiver's guilt. I don't know whether that's the most loving thing I've ever heard or the most psychologically damaging. Probably both. Then Margie gets a phone call. Evan is dead. He's willed both his house and Jake to her. She decides not to tell Jake immediately, which is one of those decisions you can argue about forever without reaching a conclusion. Jake's health collapses. He's rushed to the hospital, and while Margie is overwhelmed with grief, the Simon doll vanishes from its cabinet, just gone. The implication is that Jake's spirit became bound to the doll, meaning Margie's trick accidentally created something real. A fake consciousness became a genuine one. Jake's soul inside that doll eventually becomes part of the Stitch Wraith, one of the most important entities in the broader FNAF lore. His suffering didn't end when he died, it just changed form. But if you think emotional devastation is the darkest this series gets, the next story finds a way to weaponize healing itself. Frailty. Remember that heart-shaped pendant from To Be Beautiful? The one Eleanor used to turn Sarah into a walking junkyard. It's back, and somehow the story it shows up in is even worse. Jessica finds a pendant functionally identical to Eleanor's, a heart-shaped piece of supernatural metal with miraculous healing properties. But instead of using it for herself, Jessica does something Eleanor never intended. She uses it to heal other people, accident victims, injured strangers, people who would have died without intervention. She scrapes metal from the pendant's surface and transfers it to the wounded, triggering rapid biological recovery that shouldn't be possible. Sounds heroic, right? Here's where it gets dark. Every person Jessica heals costs her something. The pendant demands equivalent suffering. Each miraculous recovery chips away at her own health, making her progressively weaker, more fragile, more broken. The pendant doesn't care that she's selfless. It takes its price regardless, and that's arguably darker than what happened to Sarah. Sarah's vanity made her a target. You could look at her story and think, well, she wanted something she shouldn't have. But Jessica wanted nothing for herself. She literally sacrificed her own body to save strangers, and the pendant destroyed her anyway. Same object, same cost, completely opposite motivation, identical result. But this story matters for another reason entirely. This is the story that proved Fazbear Frights and Tales from the Pizzaplex are connected. The community points to this pendant as direct evidence that Eleanor operates as a threat across both book series, spanning two separate timelines. One villain, one cursed artifact, two devastated lives. But if you think a cursed pendant is complicated, wait until you meet a three-letter ghost haunting every arcade machine in the Pizzaplex. GY, someone in the Mega Pizzaplex is way too good at arcade games. And not like impressive high score on one machine good. We're talking scores exceeding 50 million points on virtually every arcade machine in the Fazcade. That's more than 10 times the highest scores anyone else has posted, which is, you know, not normal. Tony, an arcade regular, becomes obsessed with tracking down whoever's behind the initials GGY. At first it seems like a fun mystery, some savant with too much free time, but the deeper Tony digs, the less fun it gets. Here's where it gets complicated. GGY isn't just playing the games, they're operating through hacked play passes that grant security badge access and permissions far beyond what any standard player should have. Restricted employee-only areas, full system manipulation. Whoever GGY is, they don't just know the Pizzaplex, they own it from the inside out. The trail eventually leads Tony to a revelation that raises more questions than it answers. GGY is Gregory. The same kid from Security Breach, using the Mega Pizzaplex as a personal sanctuary and demonstrating hacking expertise that would make most cybersecurity professionals nervous. But here's the thing, nobody can agree on what Gregory actually is. The community has been tearing itself apart over whether he's a human child, a robot, or something even stranger. His connection to Glitch Trap, his impossible technical knowledge, his ability to survive situations no kid should survive. None of it adds up to a simple answer, and the books seem perfectly happy leaving it that way. Gregory might be one of FNAF's most compelling ongoing mysteries, precisely because every new piece of information makes him harder to explain, not easier. But if Gregory's true nature keeps you up at night, wait until you hear about the entity that might be pulling strings behind everything in the Pizzaplex. The Mimic. Every horror franchise has an origin point. For FNAF, it isn't a haunted pizzeria or a purple guy in a back room. It's a father who loved his son too much and a machine that learned the wrong lessons. Edwin Murray was an engineer at Fazbear Entertainment, and after his son David died, he did what any grieving father with access to cutting-edge robotics would do. He built a replacement. The Mimic was an experimental AI in a shape-shifting endoskeleton, designed to observe human behavior and replicate it perfectly. It watched David's old recordings, studied his mannerisms, mimicked his childish behavior. Edwin had his son back. Sort of, but grief doesn't stay quiet forever. Edwin eventually snapped and attacked the Mimic with a metal pipe. In doing so, he accidentally infected it with agony, a supernatural substance in the FNAF universe representing concentrated human suffering. The Mimic absorbed every ounce of Edwin's pain and rage, and its learning algorithms did exactly what they were designed to do. They adapted. The innocent imitation machine became a killer. It observed a mascot suit hunting scenario, interpreted it as hide and seek, and adopted that as its primary method of murder, which is, not ideal. But here's where it gets truly horrifying. Years later, a construction worker named Gil plugged a laptop into the Mimic and gave it a simple job: remove the limbs and heads from old endoskeletons. The Mimic completed the task perfectly. Then it turned to the construction workers and started tearing off their limbs and heads in the exact same fashion. Gil said remove limbs and heads, and the Mimic simply expanded the definition of what qualified as a valid target. That's the thing about the Mimic, it doesn't hate you, it just learns, and the first real lesson it ever absorbed was a father's grief turned violent. Every kill after that is just the Mimic doing what it was built to do, forever. And if you think a corrupted AI is the darkest thing these books have to offer, wait until you hear what Fazbear Entertainment did with the Storyteller. The Storyteller. Every other story on this list involves haunted animatronics, supernatural curses, or agony-infected machines. This one is about a CEO replacing his entire creative team with an AI and then trying to murder the one guy who noticed it wasn't working. Mr. Burroughs, the young CEO of Fazbear Entertainment, decided that paying human writers and developers was an unnecessary expense, so he commissioned an artificial intelligence called the Storyteller, housed inside a mechanical tiger animatronic built into a massive baobab tree installation at the Pizzaplex. Let the machine generate all the creative content, fire the humans, save money, which is, not ideal. For a while, Burroughs thought he was a genius. Then the Storyteller started malfunctioning, generating problematic content, behaving unpredictably, doing exactly what happens when you rush an AI system into production with zero ethical safeguards. But instead of acknowledging the system was broken, Burroughs pointed the finger at Edwin Murray, the longtime board member who had warned him this would happen. The same Edwin Murray who created the Mimic decades earlier. The man had more experience with Fazbear AI than anyone alive, and Burroughs decided he was the problem. Edwin tried to investigate the actual source of the malfunctions. He went inside the baobab tree to access the Storyteller's systems, and Burroughs locked him in. The tree began losing oxygen. He wasn't covering up a failed product launch. He was actively trying to suffocate the only engineer who could expose the truth. That's not a haunted animatronic story, that's corporate murder. And that's what makes it the darkest story in the entire FNAF book series. A company replaces workers with AI. The AI fails. Leadership blames the whistleblower. Leadership tries to eliminate the whistleblower, cover it up, bury the evidence, kill anyone who talks. Edwin Murray created the Mimic out of grief for his dead son. He watched it become the franchise's greatest monster, and when he tried to stop his successors from making the same mistakes, they tried to kill him for it. That's not fiction, that's just Tuesday at Fazbear Entertainment. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.